Ancient places, professional heritage insight for Africa, archaeology, ethnography, living history, rock art, Stone Age, Iron Age, settler society, Zulu, Tonga, Tswana, Soto, Venda, UNESCO, Sahara, Amafa, prevention, protection, progress, Preveda.
Welcome to Ancient Places podcasts. I'm Sian Hall, anthropologist and heritage practitioner. I have a heritage consultancy company in South Africa, and I'm based in KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape. Together with my sub-consultants, we work throughout South Africa, but we are also able to work throughout Africa. And we work with farmers, environmental agencies, developers, NGOs, African governments, international organizations, to name a few, all in relation to heritage issues. I created the Ancient Places podcast as a practical resource for heritage students and new practitioners who are starting out in the field. It's also for environmental practitioners, developers, and institutions who work with heritage specialists and need to understand what heritage assessments involve and why they are required. The aim is to explain the process in clear, simple terms, how heritage fits into environmental reporting, why heritage clearances are needed before development, and how we can manage our cultural resources responsibly while allowing development to move forward properly. So for this first podcast, episode 1, let me begin with the simple topic of what is a heritage impact assessment and when do you legally require one? So what is heritage? When people hear the word heritage, they often think of monuments or museums. But legally, heritage is much broader. Under the South African Heritage Resources Agency and the National Heritage Resources Act, heritage resources include archaeological sites, rock art, graves and burial grounds, structures older than 60 years, cultural landscapes, places of social or historical significance, living heritage practices. So for those who are not familiar with all of these elements, I've put this list up and we can go through it again carefully. And that includes archaeological sites, rock art, graves and burial grounds, structures older than 60 years of age, cultural landscapes, places of social significance, places of historical significance, and living heritage practices. Internationally, the framework aligns with the conventions of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, better known as UNESCO, recognizing both tangible and intangible heritage. So, heritage is not just buildings and objects. It can also be memory embedded in landscape. Heritage is not confined to the tangible cultural expression, but also to intangible cultural expression. And if you own, manage, or develop land in Africa, it may be present on your property, whether you know it or not. This then brings me to What is a heritage impact assessment? A heritage impact assessment, or HIA, is a legally required process used to identify heritage resources, assess their significance, evaluate potential development impacts, and recommend mitigation measures. A heritage impact assessment is preventative, it is evidence based, and it is designed to protect both heritage resources and the landowner or developer. Often, an HIA is triggered alongside environmental processes under the National Environmental Management Act, or NEMA. Increasingly, heritage is integrated into environmental impact assessments as part of responsible development planning. When is an HIA required? Well, this is where the process becomes practical. You may need a heritage impact assessment if you are ploughing previously undisturbed land, building dams or reservoirs without considering the implications. You may need a heritage impact assessment if you are installing solar or wind infrastructure. You may need an HIA if you're considering subdividing farmland, constructing tourism facilities, applying for mining rights, conducting surveys for mining. You may need an HIA if you're considering developing an infrastructure corridor. You will certainly need one if you're thinking of altering or demolishing structures older than 60 years. And again, you'll need one if you're developing an area on which there are graves. An HIA is required if development impacts upon intangible heritage and living heritage. So, this is by no means an exhaustive list. It merely illustrates examples of when an HIA may be required. The key point is this: heritage law is triggered by impact, not intention, and even well-meaning development can have legal consequences if heritage is not properly assessed. Heritage compliance is not just a local issue. South Africa is a signatory to the UNESCO Charter and documents on the protection of heritage and culture. In addition, international funders such as the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation require cultural heritage due diligence under their environmental and social frameworks. Professional heritage management aligns with global standards informed by bodies such as the International Council on Monuments and Sites. If your project involves international investment, development finance, public-private partnerships, large infrastructure, renewable energy expansion, heritage compliance is not optional. It is embedded in funding requirements. Now, there does exist a number of common misconceptions relating to the presence of heritage and the heritage impact assessment process. So let's look at 3 of these misconceptions. 1. heritage means the project will be stopped. Not necessarily. Most projects proceed with a mitigation. 2. If I don't mention it, nobody will know. Well, archaeology has a way of revealing itself, often during construction, and that's when projects halt, and that's when costs escalate. 3. It's just paperwork. No, it's risk management. So a properly conducted HIA protects your timeline, your budget, your legal standing, and your institutional reputation. So that brings us to the question, what is the real purpose of an HIA? A heritage impact assessment is not about freezing the landscape in time. It's about informed development. It allows decision makers to avoid unnecessary damage, preserve significant resources, mitigate unavoidable impacts, demonstrate compliance, and protect community relationships. So it's a planning tool, and it's not meant to be a punishment. So if you manage land in Africa, whether as a farmer, developer, a municipality, or funder, heritage is already part of your operational landscape. Understanding it early prevents crisis later. In future episodes, we'll explore a myriad of topics related to the heritage process. Heritage is not an obstacle to development, but it does form an integral part of both the tangible and intangible landscapes. So thank you for listening to Ancient Places podcast. Until the next podcast, cheers.
Heritage in Africa, tangible and intangible, monuments and museums assess significance. Landowners, developers dividing the farm, buildings and dams, solar energy, tourism facilities, buildings older than 60 years, heritage law, international development.